we all deserve a drink. Let's wrap this up in the whiskey room. Wait, what the bloody hell are you doing here?
Hey, Papa Thrash, what's shaking?
How did you get past the dogs?
Yeah, the door was unlocked, so I figured I'd let myself in. Damn, this booze is peak.
That, you ungrateful colonial, is my last bottle of 21-year-old Glenfarclas. And wait, have you put bloody ginger ale in that? My God, I think I need to sit down.
Yo, I heard you talking about the meteor.
Oh God, here we go.
Well, it's a good occasion to bust it out. Good plane. Damned good plane. But
Look, do we really have to?
the Brits weren't the only allies to get a jet working before the end of the war. Did you know?
There's literally nothing I can do to stop you at this point, is there?
We actually introduced the P-80 Shooting Star by the war's end, and that's exactly what we're diving into. The tale of the Shooting Star. The more I research it, the more I realize that American and British aviation went hand in hand in World War II. I'll be frank, without our friends across the pond, we wouldn't have had a decent power plant for our first real frontline jet. The P-80 Shooting Star was and still is an American icon, thanks to a little help from our friends, and you know what? It changed history. And it didn't just get its start in the post-war world. If you're not that deep into airplane lore, you're probably thinking, oh, Falcon, the P-80 wasn't a World War II jet. Well, actually, the Lockheed Shooting Star did see service before the end of the war. Buckle up, boys and girls. Today we're gazing upon the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first proper jet fighter. There's an idea held in the history crowd that America was far behind the Axis in jet design during World War II. While the Germans did field jets well before the end of the war, the US wasn't lagging far behind by any means. See, that's what happens when you actually have allies that are willing to share their progress. I covered this before, but as far back as 1939, the Lockheed Corporation headed by Kelly Johnson was actively developing the L-133. While the design itself didn't get off the drawing board for a number of reasons, elements of the 133 would be preserved and feature in Lockheed's next jet design, the L-140. Meanwhile, in 1942, the Bell Corporation was busy at work designing their own aircraft, the XP-59. The XP-59 was, to put it lightly, mid. While it was powered by two General Electric J-31s, the Aerocomet, as it was called, could barely push past 400 miles an hour. In a fly-off against conventional piston aircraft like the P-47, the Aerocomet was outclassed in almost every regime. It was decided that the 66 Aerocomets produced would be relegated to training American pilots on subsequent jet designs. Meanwhile, the Lockheed Skunk Works team was on track for getting the L-140 ready for flight. The L-140, later designated XP-80, was powered by a Halford H-1 Goblin engine sent to the United States by our British friends. The XP-80 had a pretty conventional design, with straight wings and a tricycle landing gear which proved more effective for jet aircraft. It was composed, like many aircraft of the era, of aluminum and emphasized simplicity of production. It was wartime, and they had to be ready to crank these out by the thousands. Another important feature of the XP-80 was its bubble canopy, which was already seeing great success with other Allied fighters. The bubble canopy allowed for an unobstructed panoramic view around the pilot, a far cry from the XP-59's conventional canopy design from years past. On January 8, 1944, the XP-80, nicknamed Lulu Bell, was ready for its maiden flight. At Muroc Army Airfield in the high desert of California, the green jet taxied towards the runway, flanked by military officers and foreign dignitaries of the Allied powers. At the controls was Milo Garrett Burkham, Lockheed's chief test pilot. Slowly, Lulu Bell accelerated down the runway under the howl of its Goblin engine. In moments, it glided into the sky. It handled wonderfully as Burkham made several passes over the field at 4,000 feet, performing aileron rolls, low passes, and climbs almost straight up. On the ground, the famous Tex Johnson, who at the time was the chief test pilot for the P-59, stated, "I have never seen a crowd so excited since my barnstorming days." After the P-80 greased its landing back at Muroc, Johnson sent a wire to Robert Stanley, another Bell test pilot. Subsequent testing of the XP-80 saw it pass through 500 miles an hour, making it the fastest aircraft in the hands of the United States. While the XP-80 was sometimes called the Green Hornet for its spinach green paint scheme during development, it was soon officially dubbed the Shooting Star. Minor modifications to the airframe resulted in the YP-80, which was the prototype of the production model. General Harold Hap Arnold, who had been studying German jets in Europe, was primed to get a hold of the new American jet. When asked when he wanted to test the new fighter in combat, he simply replied, "Now." In November 1944, it was decided that a 4-ship of YP-80s were to be sent overseas, in a clandestine operation dubbed Extraversion. In the closing days of 1944, the 4 YP-80s had arrived in Europe for operational testing. 2 went to the 8th Air Force in England, while the other 2 were sent to the 12th Air Force in Italy. Instead of the green paint that trademarked Lulu Bell, the 4 operational P-80s were coated in a pearl gray scheme. The combat-ready shooting stars were armed with a cluster of 6 50 caliber machine guns in the nose, each packing 300 rounds of ammunition. It was a simple, tried and true loadout, as the machine guns had already been chewing up Axis aircraft throughout the war to this point. The pair bound for England arrived on December 30th, 1944, and were quickly assembled at RAF Burton Wood. The 2 aircraft, 44-83026 and 44-83027, were immediately put through their paces, but tragically, flaws in the early jets started to show. On January 28, 1945, Major Frederick Bersotti was killed when the Shooting Star's Allison J-33, an American-built version of the Goblin, overheated and burned through its casing. The tail section disintegrated and the plane crashed into a nearby farmland. The other YP-80, instead of being sent into combat, was instead sent to the Rolls-Royce factory for testing with the new Neen B-41 engine. It would not see any action during the war. The Shooting Stars sent to Italy saw a bit more success. 44-83028 and 44-83029 arrived in Lucena by January 1945, right around the time Allied forces started getting buzzed by the Arado 234 jet bomber. There's not really too much information available regarding the P-80's time in the 94th Fighter Squadron of World War I fame, and whether or not they were intended to counter the new threat directly. However, the 94th's photographer, Albert Bertiglio, supposedly witnessed a P-80 on a mysterious mission near Foggia, Italy. We'll likely never know what the goals of that particular mission were, but it's possible it was a combat air patrol, aimed at knocking down German jets. Supposedly, Major Ed Leclerc flew 2 such combat sorties, but didn't encounter any aircraft. Now, I'm not going to speculate too much on this, but if you know any more about extraversion operations from World War II, please let me know. It's been 80 years, so you probably won't get in trouble. Probably. Of the initial batch of 14 P-80s built in 1944, 1 was modified into a photo reconnaissance bird. The aircraft was dubbed F-14. Wait, what? No, not that one. So prior to 1947, photo recon aircraft were given the F designation, as the more sensible P was allocated to pursuit or fighter aircraft. I know, it was wacky by today's standards. In any case, the Sol F-14 was one of the first P-80s to crash when it was lost in a stateside crash in '44. That being said, early jets were just dangerous. Teething issues with engine fires were a huge problem, soon to be rectified with subsequent models. By July 1945, 83 P-80s have been delivered to the Army Air Corps. While an incredibly small number compared to their German and British counterparts, they would continue production all the way through the 1940s. By the end of their production cycle, over 1,700 examples were produced, and that's not even counting its long-lasting trainer variant, the T-33. The T-33 was a pretty straightforward adaptation of the P-80 into a training aircraft. The fuselage was extended to allow a second crewman, and the T-33 would arguably become more famous than its fighter counterpart. The T-33 took its first flight in 1948, and quickly became the backbone of the US Air Force's jet pilot training program. It would be exported worldwide and be used by the air forces of Bangladesh, Belgium, Bolivia, Brazil, Burma, Canada, Chile, the Republic of China, Colombia, Cuba, Denmark, the Dominican Republic, Ethiopia, Ecuador, El Salvador, France, West Germany, Greece, Guatemala, Honduras, Indonesia, Iran, Italy, Japan, Libya, Mexico, the Netherlands, Nicaragua, Norway, Pakistan, Paraguay, Peru, the Philippines, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Korea, Spain, Thailand, Turkey, Uruguay, Yugoslavia, and of course, us. The friggin' thing would be used in a military capacity up until 2017, when Bolivia sent the last of their T-birds to pasture. In the end, 6,557 T-33s would be completed. Whew, I need another drink after that.
Oh, thank God, I thought you were never going to ask. Here.
Oh, thanks, bro.
That's Lord to you.
Hell, on that note, the T-33 was even adapted as a carrier trainer, the T-2V Sea Star. The Sea Star had a multitude of features added to allow for carrier use, not limited to strengthened landing gear, an improved bubble canopy, and a tailhook. But it didn't quite live up to what the Navy was looking for. The Allison J-33 was, well, less than ideal for carrier ops. It was renamed the T-1 after the 1962 Tri-Service designation came into play, and it was retired in the 1970s in favor of the more capable T-2 Buckeye. But let's circle back to the P-80 itself. While it missed seeing combat in World War II, it would soon draw blood over the skies of Korea. By 1950, when the United Nations became embroiled in the Korean conflict, the P-80 had seen a bit of a facelift. After 1947, when the US Air Force was formed, the P-80 was redesignated the F-80, F for fighter replacing the old P for pursuit. On that note, the old F-14 recon version was redesignated FP-80A. The redubbed F-80A was upgraded to the C model. The F-80C was given an upgraded Allison J-33-A35 engine that offered improved thrust and reliability, and a pair of fuel tanks were added to the wing tips to offer increased range. Another vital addition to the F-80C was an ejection seat. Early in the P-80's development, several pilots, including top-scoring American ace Dick Bong, were killed in low-altitude accidents. In Bong's case, his engine failed on him, and while he was able to bail out of the falling shooting star, his parachute sadly didn't deploy in time. While the first-generation F-80 catapult seat was far from a 0-0 seat, it did a good job of improving pilot survivability. The F-80C was also given a Sperry APG-30 radar range and gun sight. Previously, the P-80 was equipped with a gyroscopic lead computing gun sight that required the pilot to manually input the range to the target. With the addition of a rudimentary ranging radar in the nose, the F-80C could reliably lead targets at longer ranges while at the same time taking a load off the pilot. The same gun sight would also be employed in the F-80's successor, the F-86, but that's a story for another day. On November 8, 1950, a flight of shooting stars of the 16th Fighter Interceptor Squadron zipped through the cold Korean air near the Yalu River. In the flight was First Lieutenant Russell Brown. The Silver Jets had already strafed a North Korean anti-aircraft battery near Sinanju when they were notified of a communist aircraft flight in the area. Within moments, 4 swept-wing jets bearing North Korean markings turned towards the shooting stars. These were not the older Yak-9s or LA-9s the Americans had regularly fought previously. These were the new MiG-15. The MiG-15 was the most advanced fighter in theater at the time and was almost 100 miles an hour faster than the World War II vintage F-80. Despite this, Brown was able to get behind one of the sleek fighters and unload his Browning 50 cals at it. The first official jet versus jet combat had commenced, and the F-80 flight claimed a kill on the MiGs. Now this is where things get a little muddy. As I've stated before, what's claimed versus what actually fireballs doesn't always line up. While Brown's guns may have struck home, their target, a MiG-15 flown by Senior Lieutenant Karidanov of the 72nd Guards Fighter Aviation Unit, made it back to base. This may have not been the first jet-on-jet engagement either, as another 72nd Guard pilot, a Lieutenant Kalmanich, supposedly claimed an F-80 a week earlier on November 1st, but that shooting star was reported destroyed by ground fire. Perhaps we'll never know for sure what exactly went down with these early jet engagements, but one thing was clear: the jet age had begun. The old shooting stars, outclassed by the new MiG-15s, were relegated to ground attack and close support missions, jobs that their straight-wing designs did extremely well. Regardless, the shooting star was an obsolete plane by war's end, and all 10 of the F-80 squadrons in Korea had transitioned to either the F-86 Sabre or the F-84 Thunderjet by 1953. Still, they left their mark on history, and not without losses of their own. 277 F-80s were lost in the war, 113 to ground fire and 14 to enemy aircraft. That being said, they still claimed 17 kills over communist aircraft. The P-80 Shooting Star did well to leave its legacy as America's first operational jet fighter. It really could do everything. It had variants able to dogfight, perform ground attack, photo reconnaissance, forward air controlling, and was the backbone of pilot training for many nations deep into the 21st century. You can even find T-33 Shooting Stars in civilian hands today. Throughout the United States, over a dozen T-33s are kept in flying condition and perform in air shows around the country. If you're at the right place at the right time, you might get to see a show very similar to the one Tex witnessed 80 years ago, when Lulu Bell first took to the sky.
Yes, very interesting, very interesting. You are rapidly approaching the edge of the envelope of my patience, beyond which I assure you there is only darkness. Now get out.
Okay. If you're interested in supporting my shenanigans, please check out my Patreon. It helps keep videos like this come off the press and keeps me out of a cardboard box. I appreciate every single one of you. A special thanks goes out to my Ace of Aces tier on Patreon. You guys rock. Captain Fantastic, Deuce, Ghoul, Iron, Jake Fuentes, Kodai, Private Petey, Aspen, Tico, Weefy, Boats FG, Blake Storm Elite, Pecops, and our newcomer, Nebula Creates. Keep that sun at your back now, you hear?
Driving